Last weekend, my husband, a 38M, attended a bachelor party in Ibiza. The event was organized by the best man, who had rented an extravagant private villa located far from the bustling city. This villa was a true paradise on the surface, secluded yet luxurious, fully staffed, perched right on the ocean, and equipped with enough rooms to provide each member of their small group his own private space. However, beneath this picture-perfect facade, an unsettling undercurrent ran through my mind from the very beginning. My husband wasn't particularly thrilled about going. We've had an overwhelming summer filled with work and travel, and the thought of another trip, even for a bachelor party, didn't excite him. He initially declined the invitation, telling the groom and the best man that he couldn't make it. But they wouldn't take no for an answer. They insisted he come along, claiming the trip wouldn't be the same without him. The best man even went so far as to purchase a non-refundable plane ticket for my husband, leaving him with no choice but to agree. In the days leading up to the trip, I couldn't shake a persistent, gnawing feeling. Call it intuition or paranoia, but something about this trip felt wrong. I couldn't pinpoint why, but there was a weight in my chest that only grew heavier as the departure date approached. My husband assured me it was just a relaxing getaway with a few old friends, but my gut told me otherwise. Then the itinerary arrived. The best man had sent over a detailed schedule, complete with instructions for themed attire. One night was labeled Blacklight Night, another was Miami Vice Night. They were told to pack their best swim trunks and dress to impress as though attending a glamorous Vegas pool party. My husband and I found this absurd, joking about how ridiculous it was to dress to impress when the event was just a group of guys hanging out. It seemed like the best man was trying hard to make the trip lively, given how small the group was. Still, that nagging feeling of unease lingered. The afternoon they arrived at the villa, my husband texted me a series of updates. He even sent a video walkthrough of his room, proudly showing off the breathtaking view of the ocean from his balcony. We exchanged messages about our business, work topics mostly, and everything seemed normal. Yet, as the evening progressed, the tone of his texts shifted. His responses became more vague, less frequent. I brushed it off, assuming he was simply busy enjoying himself, and resisted the urge to press further. The following morning, my husband posted a photo to his Instagram story. It was a shot of the breakfast table at the villa, a picturesque setup with the pool and ocean in the background. Nothing seemed unusual at first glance. However, later that morning, I stumbled upon the villa's Instagram page. They had reposted a video tagged by another guest, a woman. In her story, she and two other women were eating breakfast at a table that looked eerily familiar. She panned her camera across the table, capturing the same decorations that I recognized from my husband's earlier photo. Decorations that were specifically set up for the bachelor party. A cold chill ran down my spine. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence that the women had stayed at the villa before our husbands arrived, but the evidence was undeniable. After quadruple checking the details, it became clear that these women were there at the same time as my husband and his friends. I clicked on her profile and began scrolling through her other stories. What I saw made my stomach churn. The women had been at the villa the previous night, dressed for Blacklight Night, partying alongside our husbands. They weren't just guests passing through, they had stayed overnight. My mind raced as I pieced together the timeline. I couldn't stop myself. I continued stalking her Instagram, then found the profiles of the other two women. One of them had posted clips of them lounging in the pool, with the husbands visible in the background. Another shared a photo of them gambling around a table, my husband sitting right next to her. Then came the detail that sent me into a spiral. One of the women had OnlyFans links in her bio, and her content on another platform was blatantly pornographic. My worst fears were realized, and I lost it. Without hesitation, I called my husband. At first, he tried to deny everything, stumbling over his words in an effort to dismiss my accusations. But when he realized I had actual proof, he admitted the truth. He explained that the best man had organized a surprise for the group after their arrival, and that surprise was the presence of these escorts who were staying at the villa for the entirety of the trip. He swore he hadn't participated in anything inappropriate, claiming he planned to tell me everything once he returned home. His justification: if he had told me during the trip, I might have alerted the other wives, causing the entire situation to explode and dragging everyone else into chaos. I was livid. How could anyone think it was appropriate to bring strange women, escorts no less, into a bachelor party where every attendee was in a committed relationship? The best man had effectively trapped all of them in a secluded villa with no escape, forcing them to keep secrets and lie to their wives to avoid being labeled as the traitor of the group. Now I'm left with an impossible dilemma. My instinct is to tell the other wives. They deserve to know the truth about what happened. But what if they already knew? What if I'm the only clueless one whose husband failed to inform her of the plans? Based on my conversations with my husband since his return, it seems I'm the only wife who's aware of this. Do I expose the truth and risk shattering my friends' marriages? Or do I stay silent, complicit in this disrespectful, dirty secret? My heart aches with sadness and confusion. Update 1. I had always hoped that this ridiculous bachelor party culture, with its reliance on sex workers, was something that belonged to the past, long gone by now. But here I am, dealing with a situation where I'm facing the same betrayal, almost as if history is repeating itself. My first marriage was destroyed because of a bachelor party. It was my brother-in-law, someone I thought I could trust and who I believed cared about me, who made the disastrous decision to hire a prostitute for the party. When I found out what was going on, I could feel my blood boiling. I saw what was coming a mile away, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I confronted him, blew up, and tried to stop it. But the event went on regardless. That was the beginning of the end for my marriage. I was just 19 at the time. And even though I tried to hold on to the idea of a wedding I had already paid for, I ended up leaving the marriage less than a year later. I remember vividly considering calling off the wedding altogether, but I had already invested so much into the wedding, both financially and emotionally, and I couldn't bring myself to cancel. I should have, though. Looking back, I now realize how much that decision cost me. In hindsight, it was a huge mistake not to walk away sooner. But at the time, I didn't have the courage to make the right choice. I vividly recall asking my brother-in-law just days before the wedding if it would be acceptable for me to have some random sex with someone else. His reaction was one of utter disbelief. He looked at me as if I had just sprouted 3 heads. The audacity, the double standard was so stark that it almost felt surreal. This whole antiquated idea of what a bachelor party is supposed to be needs to die. It's an archaic and misogynistic tradition that should have been left behind, and I honestly thought it had. I had hoped that by now we had moved past these outdated, toxic rituals that still permeate certain circles of society. The reality, however, is that they are still alive and well. Of course, my marriage had other issues, but starting things off on such a toxic note created a massive strain. That one decision, one horrible, selfish choice, set the tone for everything that followed, and it weighed on our relationship every single day. In retrospect, I can see how much that night, that bachelor party, poisoned everything. It was a choice that reverberated throughout the entirety of our marriage, leaving scars that never really healed. Update 2, there is absolutely no way any of the other wives would be okay with this if they knew what was going on. The thought of them being in the dark about everything makes my skin crawl. If none of them know, they are being completely deceived, and I can't even imagine how angry they would be if they found out. Honestly, if I were in their shoes, I'd be having a full-blown panic attack right now, and I wouldn't be able to sleep a wink until my husband came back home. How could they sleep, knowing that their husbands are out there, engaged in something so dishonest, while they're at home believing everything is fine? This whole situation is just so twisted and wrong. The wives deserve to know the truth. They need to come together and confront the best man, the one who masterminded all of this. That sleazy, good-for-nothing piece of garbage should be held accountable for what he's done to their marriages. It's unbelievable that someone could act like that and think they wouldn't be exposed. But I'm not about to sit here and let that happen. The wives need to band together because if they don't, this whole thing could spiral even further, and the men will just get away with it. I can't just stay silent while my friends and fellow wives are being kept in the dark. If I'm the only one who knows, then I need to make sure the others find out. It's not just about me anymore. It's about making sure they have all the information to protect themselves, their marriages, and their dignity. The secrecy in this situation is appalling, and I can't let it slide. Honestly, if all the wives knew, I bet the men would start spilling their guts. Men have this weird thing about throwing their friends under the bus when they're in trouble for something they've done themselves. If one of them cheated or did something shady, you better believe the others would be throwing that person under the bus to save their own skin. These guys might think they've got this secret pact, but if it all comes out, I can't imagine any of them would stay loyal to the ones who crossed the line. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. This situation is just beyond messed up. I know I have to do something, and the thought of getting together with the other wives and taking down the best man, and even the rest of the guys, is starting to feel like the only way to right this wrong. They need to feel the consequences of their actions. I'm beyond livid right now. I know I shouldn't let it consume me, but I can't help it. My mind is racing with anger and disbelief. I want answers, I want justice, and I want the best man to pay for what he's done. It's not just about one bad decision, it's about the dishonesty, the betrayal, the utter lack of respect. This whole thing has to be exposed, and the truth has to come out, no matter how much damage it causes. These men deserve to face the music, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. On top of everything else, if all the wives find out about this, there's a chance they can start getting more details from their husbands. Let's be real. When men are caught in something, especially when they've done something bad or cheated, they often turn on each other. They start throwing their friends under the bus to make themselves look better or to deflect attention from their own wrongdoings. It's like this primal instinct to protect themselves at all costs, even if it means betraying their closest friends. So, if one of them cheated, or if any of them were involved in something shady, you better believe that the others would start spilling the beans to save themselves. Once they realize that the other wives know, the men will start panicking. They'll start talking, giving away more details than they intended. It's all going to come out eventually, and when it does, it's going to be a reckoning for all of them. This whole thing will fall apart the minute the wives start talking to each other. They've been keeping these secrets for too long, and now it's time for the truth to come out. Update 3. The moment my husband walked through the door, I knew something was off. His eyes were tired, and there was a subtle tension in his posture, like he was bracing for something. I had spent the last few days in a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and now the moment I had been dreading was finally here. It was time to confront him, and he knew I had found out, and as soon as he saw the look on my face, I could tell he regretted everything. I could feel the weight of the lies hanging in the air, and I wasn't about to let it slide. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm as I spoke. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. But my words hung heavy, the silence between us growing thicker by the second. "How could you go to that villa and be a part of that? You knew I wouldn't approve, and yet you went along with it." He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. He just stood there, his face pale, as though he was searching for the right words. I didn't give him the chance to dodge the question. I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. I needed the truth. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" I pressed, my voice rising a little. "You thought I wouldn't notice the women in the pictures, the decorations, the posts on social media? You thought I wouldn't connect the dots?" He swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding mine, and I saw the guilt in them. He started, but I cut him off, shaking my head. "No, don't give me that," I said, my anger beginning to surface. "Don't try to minimize this. You went there, you saw what was happening, and you went along with it. You participated in it. And now I have to find out about it through Instagram of all things?" His face flushed with embarrassment, and he finally spoke, though his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "It wasn't like that," he said, his words weak. "The best man told me it was just for fun, just a surprise. I didn't know they were bringing those women. I didn't know it would turn out like that." I stared at him, disbelief written all over my face. "You didn't know?" I repeated. "Really? You didn't think to ask questions? You didn't think to call me and tell me what was going on, what you were getting involved in?" I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry over this. I was angry, so angry. I had trusted him. I had believed in him. And now everything felt like it had been built on a lie. "How could you be so naive?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "You're telling me you didn't know what was going on? That you didn't realize what a mess this would cause?" He looked at me, his expression pained. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I went along with it, I could avoid making things worse." "By lying to me?" I shot back. "By keeping secrets from me? That's how you avoided making things worse?" There was a long pause as I stared at him, waiting for some kind of answer, but nothing came. I could feel the distance growing between us, and I didn't know if it could ever be bridged. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "Do you think I wouldn't notice something was off? Do you think I wouldn't see through this whole thing?" He shook his head, his voice shaking. "No, I never thought that. I just didn't want to hurt you." "You already have," I said quietly. "You've hurt me more than I ever thought possible." It was clear he was struggling with the guilt, but it didn't change the fact that he had done it. The betrayal had been done. And now, as we stood there in the living room, the weight of his actions hung between us, suffocating everything else in the room. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I even wanted to try. But what I did know was that this was far from over. There was so much more to figure out, so many more truths to uncover, and I wasn't going to let it go until I had all the answers. Update 4. As the silence lingered between us, the weight of everything we had just discussed seemed to hang in the air, thick and suffocating. My heart ached, not just from the betrayal, but from the loss of trust, the very foundation of our relationship that had been shattered. I was struggling to find the words to say next, to process everything I was feeling. Then, unexpectedly, he did something that took me completely by surprise. Without warning, he dropped to one knee, his eyes filled with an intense, desperate sincerity. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I thought I might have imagined it. "What are you doing?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked up at me, his expression raw and vulnerable. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your trust, but I am so sorry for everything. I've failed you in ways I never thought possible, and the guilt of what I've done is eating me alive. I never thought I could sink so low, but I'm asking for a second chance because you're the only one I've ever truly cared about. Please, Isabella." His words were a mixture of regret and desperation, and something in the way he looked at me made my heart waver. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger. A small part of me, though battered and bruised, wondered if there was still a way forward. Was forgiveness possible? Was there any hope left for us? Then, just as quickly as the softness had come, the reality of everything hit me again. I glanced at him, my mind racing. He had done something terrible, something unforgivable. But the man kneeling in front of me was the same man who had been there for me through so much, the same man I had loved, the same man who had once made me feel like the most important person in the world. I took a deep breath, and just as I was about to speak, the doorbell rang. Startled, we both turned toward the sound, confused. I opened the door, and to my shock, standing there were several of the wives from the group, the ones whose husbands had been at the bachelor party. Their faces were grim, and they didn't even hesitate before speaking. "We know everything," one of them said, her voice filled with determination, "and we're not going to let them get away with it. We've come to hold them accountable." I was speechless, stunned by the timing of their arrival, by the fact that they had known all along. They had been talking, coordinating behind the scenes. They had known about the party, the women, everything. They had all figured it out. "We want answers," another wife said, her eyes fierce, "and we're going to make sure the truth comes out. No more secrets." In that moment, everything changed. The anger and betrayal that had been eating away at me were no longer mine to carry alone. The other women had come to stand with me, and suddenly it wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about facing the truth together, about making sure that the men who had lied and hurt us wouldn't escape the consequences. So, as they stepped into the house, I looked at my husband, still on his knee. He glanced up at me, his face pale with fear and guilt. There was no going back now. But as I took their hands and walked into the next room with the other wives, I felt a strange sense of strength. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to heal, not just for myself, but for all of us. The truth was finally coming out. The silence was over. Update 5. A year has passed since the day I confronted my husband and the other wives, and there are things I never imagined I would experience. Our lives have changed completely, and I, along with the other wives, have faced a series of challenges that were far from easy. But now, looking back, I feel much stronger, even though there are still many wounds that haven't healed. My husband has changed. After everything that happened, he has worked hard to regain my trust. Every day, he proves that he is ready to face his mistakes and make amends. He joined marriage counseling, trying to understand and support me through the feelings of hurt and anger I still carry. We have also started communicating better, something we never had before. However, even though he has done a lot to make things right, a part of me remains cautious. Trust cannot be rebuilt overnight, and although I have learned to accept the changes in him, I know that we will never be the same as we once were. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means allowing yourself to move forward, even when the wounds are still there. With the other wives, our relationship has also changed significantly. We still keep in touch, but we are no longer just wives in the same friend group. We have become true friends, women who stood together and fought to protect our own happiness. Each one of us found a way to stand strong after that shock, and we supported each other on the healing path. The most surprising thing is that after everything that happened, we found a deeper understanding of ourselves and what truly matters. While there are times when I wonder if I can continue with the man who hurt me so much, I know that I chose my own path and it is one of strength, confidence, and determination. We are not perfect, and I don't know whether this marriage will last or not. But one thing I am sure of is that we have learned valuable lessons from our mistakes. And no matter what the future holds, I will always remember that time as a turning point where I found strength and the ability to change, not just for myself, but for those around me. We continue to walk our path, uncertain about what will come, but always with faith in the ability to heal, no matter how difficult it may be. Our journey is still long, but I no longer feel alone on it.